Greetings, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of the 1st of September 2024, and we are here today with a live stream. We are live on YouTube and on X and on Rumble. We are today here to look at the US presidential election, more specifically on the question of who is going to win or who is going to lose, or and does any of the above actually matter? The case I'm going to put forward to you over the course of the next hour or so is that the ultimate winner of this election won't matter in terms of the actual direction of travel of the United States, either in the form of US imperialism and its actions in the or against the oppressed nations of the world, or in its imperialist proxy wars, or in its attempts to wage direct wars, nor will it matter too much domestically which of these two absolute clowns wins. And I'm going to explain why. I'm also going to explain the perspective I've developed over the last few years of observing the so-called Trump phenomenon. And I'm going to argue that the anti-establishment nature of Trump was always wildly overstated by his allies and by his enemies. And I'm going to go into some details as to why. Now, let's deal first of all with the polls in question. Let's have a look at the latest numbers. So the latest numbers, I'm using the aggregated poll on 538.com. Now, always bear in mind, polls are only as good as the person or organization, corporation, whatever, who pays for them want them to be. So whenever you're looking at at any poll, always bear in mind that this is either one poll or an aggregation of polls put together by a company that wants to sell you a particular point of view. But if we look at this, we can see that there is a clear line being established here that actually broadly mirrors previous performance with Trump and rather disliked Democratic Party nominees, which is that Trump was ahead, just about ahead of Biden, and you can see Kennedy down the bottom there. He averages either 5%, but in some outlying polls he went as high as 10%. So assume that a good chunk of his votes go to Trump. That might do Trump some good. But most of the polls, and again, always bear in mind, you got to look at who paid for the poll, are saying that Trump is just about behind Harris in the overall picture. So that doesn't tell us a great deal, though, because if you looked back at 2016, Hillary Clinton was ahead of Trump all the way through and still lost the election. So what about the polls in specific swing states? Because remember, if you're not familiar with the American system, it is not a poll that takes place across the whole country and then they add up the votes of the whole country. It is done state by state. So you can win the popular vote and still lose, just as Hillary Clinton did rather hilariously a few years ago. If we go to another page on 538, we can see that in Arizona, it's a 1% difference, 49 to 48 to Trump. I'll just share this screen with you as well, so you can see what's going on. There you go. So as you can see here, the polls in some of the key states are listed. So they're saying basically it's a dead heat. A percentage point is well inside the margin of error. Same in Nevada in recent polls taken there, Trump by 1. Dead heat in Georgia, allegedly. again, North Carolina shows either 48-49 to Trump or dead or literal dead heat 50-50. I find that a little bit hard to believe. Florida leaning by quite some distance to Trump, 6 to 7%, and Texas leaning heavily to Trump, plus 9%. That's not exactly a surprise. Texas has been pretty solid Republican for as long as I can remember. So those are some of the swing states listed there. The the overall picture is, of course, that other than some of the states which are more solidly one way or the other, in a lot of places it is dead even. Now, Trump was ahead of the shambolic corpse Joe Biden, which is why the Democratic Party machine dumped old Joe and brought in Harris, and in the hope that they could change the vibes, shall we say. And that is indeed what they have tried to do. They've tried to bring in Harris, and they're trying to run, they're now successfully levered her into position. And now with the drunken nightmare Kamala Harris, they're trying to essentially run a campaign based on, as many others have said, vibes, not on specifics, because Kamala doesn't do well on specifics, apparently doesn't do well without at least a couple of gins inside of her. Now, the question as to, well, who is going to win, therefore, well, it's an awkward one, because Trump could still win, but it's undoubtedly the case that this version of Trump is a much diminished version than that which existed in 2016. Now, at this point, we should turn to discuss what it was that was legitimately different about Trump in 2016 and what has changed today. So in terms of the claim that is made by Trump's allies and his enemies, that Trump represented this new populist turn, this to a certain degree is correct, but has been wildly overstated, again, by both his allies and his enemies. Now, the difference with Trump with regard to the 2015 to 2016 election cycle was that, of course, he began it by not giving a fuck. Comes down the gold escalator in Trump Tower. He looks at what the Republican candidates are saying and battling it out over. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush were the big names, along with Scott Walker, if you remember him, former governor of Wisconsin. They were all expected to do very well, and it would be between those four, possibly, before Trump entered the race. So Trump enters the race not giving a fuck. And that's the basis, the entire basis of his appeal in 2016. That and the fact he was the only one who came out with a confused but avowedly protectionist, protectionist and state interventionist agenda on the side of industry. A lot of this in the later period of the campaign wasn't his idea. I mean, these were all the ideas of Bannon, and credit where credit is due. Bannon did run that campaign quite effectively, and again, when discussing Bannon, one has to be clear that this guy wasn't an outsider either. I mean, Bannon made his money, I think, because he got a lot of money out of Seinfeld, the series, because he was an executive producer on it somehow. He got himself involved in that and made a lot of money off that. So this guy's an insider in the entertainment business. So let's not get any ideas that this guy's like some sort of backwoodsman coming in to undermine the elites. This guy's very much in the what you would call the intellectual class, intellectual caste within the American bourgeois system. But he did run an effective campaign. He knew that in certain swing states, hitting Hillary Clinton very hard on NAFTA and on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a big sort of successor to NAFTA, but meant to be done on the Trans-Pacific wide area. This was going to be something which hurt Clinton, and it did. It very much did. And in the before that, the reason why he managed to come out on top in the Republican primary was because he looked at the field. He took all the talking points they were bigging up, which is especially on immigration, and he went further with them, just as he does in everything else. So he worked out that the Republican audience likes to hear tough talk in immigration. So Ted Cruz is saying we're going to deport more people than ever before. Marco Rubio is saying the same thing. Jeb Bush is going back and forward on the issue. So what does Trump do? Comes up with a slogan that will fit on a T-shirt, which is "Build the wall." He never did. He never will, of course. But again, it was a slogan that worked for him at the time. And because he was prepared to essentially play the role of the Joker, Joker in the pack, not the DC character, and to essentially play the role of the jester in terms of mocking the powerful to their faces. This, of course, gains him a lot of popularity. I mean, we all remember his 2016 campaign. It was very funny. Trump in 2015 to 2016, no matter what else he was funny. When he was mocking Jeb Bush or bullying Rand Paul or saying Ted's wife, very ugly, terrible woman, or dismissing Marco Rubio. Again, this was funny stuff. The idea of this reality TV show guy belittling and mocking all these figures, which nobody really likes. Nobody really likes Jeb Bush or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio. So to see Trump belittle them was funny. And the fact that he went further than anybody else in terms of the rhetoric over the immigration issue, in terms of his promises we're going to kill ISIS, we're going to kill all of them, every last one of them. I got a plan. It's so good. A good section of the Republican electorate did latch on to that, and he attracted a certain following because he was, again, through Bannon's finagling, able to portray himself as an outsider. But of course he isn't. Yes, he was running on a more economically interventionist or industrial interventionist program than Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, or Ted Cruz ever would. But again, this wasn't something which was entirely his own doing, and it wasn't something that was he just plucked out of thin air. The interventionist arguments inside the American bourgeois system have been growing in strength for a number of years now. Remember, even George W. Bush slapped tariffs to protect certain industries. He slapped tariffs on coal, I believe, a while back, over 20 years ago. But the arguments over support for industrial development had been growing in strength for a number of years, probably since at least 2012. TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, was really an Obama-era policy that was designed to try and ensnare and undermine China. Ensnare it basically by more stymie it, I think I should say, by signing up places like Indonesia and other neighbors of China and funneling US capital more into them than into China, trying to attract capital from the imperialist bloc into other countries other than China, with the idea being that they will grow at China's expense, and they can slow down Chinese growth, and that the US can use that time in which China has been slowed to catch up with China in key areas, in science and technology and industrial production. Trump drove a coach and horses through that by destroying it, which is very, very funny. Again, did it mainly opportunistically, but again, very funny that he did. Now, the way in which Trump has been portrayed since then has defined him. They're portrayed in terms of the idea of him being a Russian long-term deep cover asset, which I wish was true, but very much isn't, or the idea that he's this sacred truth teller. The fact is that Trump's popularity, whilst it was unique in terms of the previous Republican contenders and the and the way in which elections had been conducted since then. Like Trump's popularity was still overstated. Like he lost the popular vote in 2016 by 3 million to Hillary fucking Clinton, who is, needless to say, one of the most unpopular presidential candidates in recent years. So the idea that Trump was uniquely popular was wildly overstated. Now, if we compare and contrast the election results between 2012 and 2016, we can see that Mitt Romney's total in 2012 was almost 61 million. Trump's in 2016 was 62 million. So that's or 62.9 million, so almost 63. So again, he gets 2 million more votes. So not all that much of a difference if you compare that to the size of the American electorate. But by winning some key areas such as Florida, he's able to actually come out ahead on the Electoral College vote. So in terms of raw popularity, Trump was never as popular as he is portrayed as being. He's, again, slightly more popular in 2016 than Mitt Romney was in 2012. The difference was, of course, that the Democrats had a much more despised candidate in 2016 than they had in 2012. And so that leads to what I would say is a lot of people falling into a trap. And the trap is that a lot of people, because of the way that the Democrats responded to Trump by cooking up all kinds of bizarre and insane theories, people started to think that Trump was an outsider when he never was. He was only an outsider in terms of the fact that he came from TV rather than politics and movies to a certain extent. Now, the mistake that was made, I think, by a lot of people was to invest themselves in these back and forths and these rows about Trump and what he was and what he wasn't. Now, the American left, of course, willingly jumped into this swamp and sank in it. They willingly bought the Democratic Party cooked up hysteria, which, if you've got any real historical memory, was not all that much different to the Republican sponsored hysteria about Obama after 2008. Both the Republicans and the Democrats say outlandish and stupid things that aren't true about the opposite party's presidential incumbent or presidential candidate. Now, remember, we can go all the way back to Bill Clinton with this. Like Bill Clinton and Hillary have done all kinds of heinous shit that they should have been, driven out of office for. But what do the Republicans choose to focus on? They choose to focus on Monica Lewinsky and the Whitewater land deal, which there was something there, but the Republicans never definitively really went after the Clintons on that. They ended up focusing on Monica Lewinsky, when now we know there was a whole pile of shite that the Clintons were bathing in, and a whole heap of things that Bill Clinton had really done, going all the way back to his days as Arkansas governor, which the Republicans, despite being in a position to do so, never seriously went after him over. So we go all the way back to his days as Arkansas governor. I mean, Juanita Broderick, the woman who credibly accused Clinton of rape, what did, I believe, give some testimony to the Kenneth Starr inquiry, but this wasn't made into a nationwide scandal, which it should have been. Yeah, she became partially known, but again, the media covered for Clinton in a major way, and the Republicans didn't push her to the forefront all that much. Why? Well, because they had a narrative about Clinton that was safe, and they didn't want to push too far because they had their guys in Congress and Senate with a whole load of dirty laundry in their closets that was just as bad as stuff that Clinton had done. We just think of a few of the Republican scandals that followed in the George W. Bush era, the Larry Craig bathroom scandal, hilariously, or the Hastert scandal, which I believe involved underage boys. There was the various different scandals involving congressional pages. For Republicans, it tends to be more scandals on the homosexual side. With Democrats, it tends to be more on the sleazing on underage girls side. So it's a bit of a strange difference there, but there you go. But one of the reasons why they didn't go full bore after Clinton was because, again, there was too much dirt on their side. And if they went full bore after him for Jeffrey Epstein, well, old Jeffrey had just as much dirt on Republicans as he does Democrats, I would guess, or they could certainly conjure up some. So they go after Clinton for stuff that he could easily survive. Now, the Democrats do roughly the same thing with George W. Bush. Again, when you've got these two parties which are oligarchic in their nature, but need to maintain something of a popular base, you can't do it through anything positive. You can only do it through negative reinforcement. And so you've got to mobilize a certain segment of your activist base, not really on much that's positive, but more on stuff that's negative. So you run candidates for the Democratic Party in the mid-2000s based on the idea that they're not George W. Bush and that they weren't as directly implicated in the Iraq War, even though many of the congressional Democrats, of course, were, including a certain Joe Biden. And so you whip up all kinds of scandals about Bush, but you don't go after Bush on the really fatal stuff, like the really fatal stuff being not just the war, the fact that Bush knowingly told a bunch of lies to justify it, but you also don't go after Bush on the stuff that could really politically have killed him, which is the 9/11 stuff. Even if you limit your inquiries or limit your field of vision to the official story, the contents of the 9/11 Commission report, you could easily make a massive scandal out of the fact that no senior official resigned because of 9/11. And again, this is even if you completely stick to what's in the 9/11 Commission report. You could easily go after George W. Bush for his family's extensive ties to the Al Saud family, the ruling family in Saudi Arabia, or the fact that George W. Bush and his father were tied to the Saudi regime directly by business ties over many years, and that same ruling family had been found to be funneling money to some of the suspects, shall we say, who are reported to have died in the 9/11 attacks, some of the men who were said to have carried this out. Again, this is all came out of official investigations. So you never go after Bush for any of that. It's about the fact that these facts were known at the time. You don't go after Bush for the obvious lies he told to the American people and to Congress, all the obvious lies that his representatives told to Congress, because, again, like all of your guys were on board with this, and the Iraq War was an agreed priority of American imperialism, and nobody really wanted to go against that. So they go after Bush, again, for a series of other things which were peripheral. Same with Obama. Obama does loads of dirty stuff, but what do the Republicans do? They come up with like ludicrous stuff, which, including about his family background, which, to use the popular internet term, performs a shit coating operation on anybody who's actually asking legitimate questions. So Obama's best friends were the Republicans and their media machine, because they came up with all this insane shit about him, which actually enabled him to mask what he was really up to. So when you've got like various Republican congressmen indulging in sort of Glenn Beck style hysteria about the fact that Obama's a secret Muslim who prays to Mecca 5 times a day and prays for the collapse of the American empire, and that he wasn't even born in America, and his family background's questionable. Now the funny thing is, this is a blatant case of a shit coating operation, because his family background is questionable, but not in the way that the Republicans said. See, his old man, Barack Obama Sr., I think he was called, came to the United States sponsored essentially by an American intelligence program. His old man was an American intelligence asset who had come to the United States to be trained in the ways of, well, enforcing the will of US imperialism in his home country of Kenya. That's who Barack Obama Sr. was. And Obama's stepfather was an Indonesian CIA asset. His mother was an intelligence asset. I think his maternal grandfather was as well. So some serious questions to be asked about Obama's actual family, both biological family and step family. But none of those, of course, were asked. Instead of which, what you got was, I think, a deliberate concoction, which was designed to actually hide the truth or save Obama from legitimate questions about the various characters who are circulating in his family background, who are so close to US intelligence agencies. That should have been a question. Why were so many of Barack Obama's direct blood relatives people who worked for the CIA? What did his stepfather do in the Indonesian genocide of 1965? What was his mother's involvement in CIA operations in Indonesia prior to 1965? Why? Of course, those questions aren't asked. What you get is the Republicans spinning a cartoon about the fact that he was secretly raised in Kenya by Mau Mau guerrillas or something and then unleashed on the United States. Again, this is what a shit-coating operation does. It takes legitimate points and buries them in a whole bunch of bullshit. And the bullshit is screamed by carnival barkers like Alex Jones or Glenn Beck, so that anybody who asks a question about hey, why is it that Obama's father and stepfather were both American intelligence assets? Anybody who says that is then made to look insane because it sounds like you're repeating stuff from Alex Jones and Glenn Beck. There's other, of course, things that should have been raised about Obama's presidency as well, such as why was his entire cabinet sent for the approval of Citibank in an email that was leaked by WikiLeaks? Why were all his policies designed to protect the banks? All those kind of things get lost because the official opposition is headlining with like insane shit that again is designed to protect Obama, not to actually scrutinize him. It's designed to do two things. It's designed to delegitimize questions that might arise about the fact that, well, what is the Affordable Care Act? What does it really do? It's essentially a giant corporate handout to the health insurance industry. But again, like the Republicans put forward a load of like insane theories that were again a shit-coating operation. Like you put forward the idea of death panels, like the idea that the government's going to decide when to kill grandma, etc. But of course, the health insurance companies decide that, and both the Republicans and the Democrats are in business to protect the health interests of the health insurance companies. So by saying things like that, you immediately then make sure that that questions about the Affordable Care Act aren't asked by a huge section of the American population, or more specifically by a section of the American working class that votes Democrat, because they associate it with like the insane ravings of American Republicans. So again, like everything the Republicans do helps Obama in this regard, and on the other side of it, it helps rile up like the most fervent elements of their activist base, with filling their heads full of just as much bullshit as the Democrat Party's base has their heads filled with. The other big thing was Benghazi, and again, this is another example of the Republicans performing a shit-coating operation, because again, as Max Blumenthal has chronicled exhaustively in his work, there were serious questions about what was going on at Benghazi, and it turns out that the CIA was using it as a weapons smuggling staging post for running weapons out of Libya and into Syria to be supplied to jihadists. And then this whole thing was being supervised by the ambassador to Libya. That's why he was there in Benghazi, to supervise this intelligence operation. And then he gets killed basically in a gun battle with a militia group that had gone rogue. But that was the question to ask, which is, why was the ambassador there? What was he actually doing? Instead of which, the Republicans, under Trey Gowdy, this sort of cartoonish, freakish figure, pursued a line of questioning that was insane, because they basically tried to prove that Hillary Clinton had ordered a hit on the ambassador. Whereas in actual fact, Hillary Clinton should have been held to account for fueling, for the war in Libya to start with, but then also for engineering or helping to engineer the war in Syria via the running of guns from Libya to Syria. That's what should have been asked of Clinton, and that's what the Benghazi hearing should have been about. Instead of which, the Republicans turned it into a giant, again, a shit-coding operation. Put forward a load of insane shit, which Hillary Clinton can easily brush off, and that ends up helping Hillary Clinton, not hindering her. Same operation is done with Trump. And remember, these operations in bourgeois politics in the United States are designed to do two things. They're designed to kill off legitimate questions and also to rile up a increasingly small but loud base that each party still possesses, filled with hatred and bile towards the other side, not based on anything real, but based on fantasies that have been conjured into existence by PR men. Same thing is applied to Trump, as was applied to Obama, but from the other side. Again, what was the allegations that the Republicans threw at Obama? Un-American, foreign, undermining America, under mysterious foreign influences. The long shadow of the Ayatollah is upon him, etc. Again, what do the Democrats do with Trump? He's a Russian agent. He's being controlled by the Kremlin. He's not really standing up for the interests of America. He's in the pay of somebody else. Again, these are very similar operations that are done here. Yes, the Trump one has more, I would say, more frenzied hysteria to it, but not by much. I mean, I'm old enough to remember like the hysterical bullshit that the Republicans ran with about Obama. There was less direct involvement of the intelligence services with regards to that. It was more a traditional political hit job that they were doing. But similar practices were involved. What changes with Trump is that Trump did legitimately tread on some toes in 2016. And he upset some characters with some of the things that he committed to. So, for instance, Trump always prioritized the coming war with China. Obama prioritized that too, but in different ways. So Obama's way to deal with it was the Obama administration's way of dealing with it was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump wanted a trade war and more protectionism. But the thing that Trump, of course, does, which upsets them, is that he suggests bargaining with the Russians, which the most aggressive sections of U.S. imperialism really don't want to do. They think that they can get a win via the Ukraine operation, which is why they're so desperate for it to continue. Now, Trump offends them by talking about doing a deal with the Russians. He was always not very non-specific on what that deal would be, because he had no real idea. He just thought it might be neat. Bannon probably had an idea about what it might be, because Bannon had a more clearly worked out agenda, which is why Bannon was out of the White House within 8 weeks and Trump fired him. It's a remarkable testament to the fact that Trump didn't even understand where his victory came from. He thought it was him. In reality, the victory came through Bannon's strategy. Again, I'm no advocate for Bannon, but he put forward a winning stratagem in 2016. The way in which this develops, of course, is that it's now the Democrats saying the most utterly insane things about Trump. But again, they aren't damaging Trump with his base. They are firing up to a certain extent some of their own base, but not really damaging Trump all that much. The other objection, which of course the profoundly elitist figures who run the American system, the other objection that they have about Trump is that he did legitimately attract a certain base that came to him independently outside of established political channels. Like Mitt Romney didn't have the kind of base that Trump does. Bush didn't either. McCain didn't. Trump has a base of support which is fanatically loyal to him personally and to his brand. that is independent of the Republican Party to a degree. What's been done with Trump, though, again, like to go back to the point we're making here, is a similar thing that was done with Obama, which is that legitimate questions about Trump are buried under an avalanche of bullshit. And again, like the Democrats couldn't land any fatal blows on him, and the more sensible of them knew they were never going to. They knew they were never going to get impeachment through the Senate. They knew that Trump had done his deal with Mitch McConnell to push through the more typical parts of the Republican agenda, including tax cuts, and a massive tax cut for the wealthy, which is what they were after. They knew they weren't going to get him out, but they were pretty confident that they could knock any suggestion of bargaining with the Russians off the table, and they were right, they did. However, they never went after Trump in a way that could have seriously destroyed his presidency. So you want to really destroy Trump, and Clinton didn't even do this in the campaign. Like, you destroy his reputation in business, which would have been fairly easy to do given the shadiness of all the bankruptcies he'd engaged in, or the fact that Trump was self-confessed in terms of having mob ties, or the fact that he had taken like very shady loans from various different financial institutions, the fact that he was essentially a con man and a fraudster. All of that was sort of mentioned, but rapidly dropped in favor of the conspiracy theories. Just as like the legitimate questions about Obama got buried under an avalanche of conspiracy theories, because they didn't want to discuss Trump having mob ties, probably intelligence ties as well, or anything like that, because a lot of that is stuff that Hillary Clinton is guilty of. Perhaps not the mob ties, but certainly the intelligence ties. And if you start going after Trump for some of that stuff, then he might start dishing some dirt on stuff that he had on the Clintons. So you got to basically focus on bullshit, which is designed to, again, rile people up on your side, but not designed to deliver knockout blows to Trump. It's designed to keep Trump disciplined every time he might stray out of line, but not actually destroy him. Same operations being run this time round. Like, they could easily destroy Trump if they wanted to, but again, like, they have no desire to. Not really. Trump, whilst he was despised by many in the system, ultimately his elevation to the presidency was a sign of a system in decline, but the system dealt with him with relative ease. He didn't really disrupt things all that much, which is why the attempts to remove him via impeachment were never really that serious. They knew they wouldn't succeed. Again, it was much more about electioneering and making sure that Trump remained on message than it was about seriously attempting to remove him. Now we reach the point where Trump has been fully cucked. He's fully bent the knee to the Republican establishment. Yes, there's stuff in there in the Republican platform from J.D. Vance about industrial intervention, more protectionist measures. But again, the Biden administration's been doing that already. Vance praised Biden's industrial policy for heavily investing in American industrial production again. Of course, this all disappears into the vast corrupt morass of the American corporations who don't want to invest. They just want to pay out to shareholders, cash out and fuck off. But again, like the industrial action in terms of the protectionism, in terms of increased investment, state investment in industry, this is stuff that Biden's been doing because, again, this is a turn taken in the strategies of the American ruling class, of American imperialism itself. The key elements in the ruling class and their intelligentsia have realized that increased investment is needed, and therefore Trump's policies are no longer outliers anymore. He was a little bit ahead of the game, if anything, in terms of realizing the need for renewed investment. Renewed investment's not going to cut it, though, because the system by which American production is organized is so bankrupt and corrupt that this increased investment will just disappear out the back door. So Trump was never the rebel that people said he was. His appeal was largely based on him being a sort of jester figure who was willing to mock the powerful to their faces, whilst not really posing any great threat to them. The real objections that they had to him was these crude mannerisms, which these people who are in the Democrats and the Republicans who are very particular about form and formalities. They didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that he riled up a bunch of petty bourgeois and a certain minority of the working class, and didn't like the fact that he made appeals to them or had an appeal to them, which went beyond the traditional methods of oligarchic party organization in the United States. But again, the reason why Trump is dead level or even behind Harris now, even if we accept that a lot of these polls will be cooked by the establishment in the United States to favor Harris, we should always bear in mind that Trump, despite having a passionate and intense following behind him, has never been this overwhelmingly popular figure. He's intensely popular amongst a minority of the population. He's not FDR. He's not, Abraham Lincoln. He's not even LBJ at his peak. He's a representative of the degeneration of a system, a court jester, and not very much else. And this is the fact that he gained the popularity that he did is a symptom of a system which is in a deep crisis. But Trump has no answers to anything. He is just basically a man who got where he was by 40 plus years of fame and, of course, by having a good troll game. But again, that doesn't translate into anything other than bitching and moaning on Twitter. So there we are. That's to conclude the point that we're making here. There's every chance that Trump will lose, but it won't matter all that much. What will be there is a consistent policy when it comes to increased hostility towards China. Consistent policy will be that they try and keep the war going in Ukraine as long as possible, and a consistent policy of aggression towards Central and Southern America. And with that, I'll conclude and turn to comments from the floor. Right. Right, okay, so let's go back to the top here. Hello to all 255 of you currently watching. Hello to Dr. Ahmed, who joins us from Egypt and says, I think he, that is Trump, will lose. He lost his charm. He's more pathetic than the 2020 campaign. He can't fake being an outsider anymore. His fake anti-war stance is being exposed by his cheering for Israel, genocide and threatening Iran. Yeah, he was never anti-war. I mean, the only way you could describe him as that is that he did say, well, maybe we should do a deal with the Russians. That's it. I mean, you could argue that he wanted to do a deal with the DPRK, but again, a lot of that was like symbolism and gestures, and like that didn't go anywhere because Trump wasn't even really in control or had any real desire to be in control of his own administration. He left it all to Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who had no interest in doing it. Then he was surprised when the whole thing fell to pieces. Greetings to Grazi Knoll in Seattle, Washington. Edward joined us from the once and future Latvian Soviet Socialist Republic and asks, what's the point in discussing Trump? The US presidential office is ceremonial, and discussions about Trump feed into delusions that he is somehow a change. I disagree with you. I think that the way in which I've analysed Trump over the course of the last 40 minutes or so should show you quite clearly that I'm specifically not trying to sow any illusions in him or his Democratic opponent. I'm making the point that Trump was never as different as his fans or his enemies said that he was. But to answer Edward's question, yes, I will be doing a show on the colonization of Eastern Europe by the West. That won't be for a while, though, but it is on the list. Almir joins us from Slovenia, the most liberal republic of Yugoslavia. That's not a badge of honor, I don't think. But good day to you in Ontario, Canada, who says, I'm not going to be late for school today. Well, good to have you with us. More Time Needed joins us from Skeggy, UK. So that's Skegness for those who are unfamiliar. Tim Gray says, evening comrades, great day, Liverpool and Celtic big wins. Cheer up Man United. Oh, what can it mean? To a sad Dutch bastard and a shit football team. Right, Krasavets, hello to you. Greetings to Arnold in Bridlington, the fifth poorest town in England, and that's up against some stiff competition. Rob and Beans join us from the wrong side of the Pennines. Good to have you with us, comrades. Char Paul is on Rumble and says, here we go, Yahoo, Indeed, indeed. It's getting a bit like a football crowd in here, ladies and gentlemen. David King says the Empire prefers Kamala. The Imperialists prefer Kamala because they regard her as a more pliable and reliable vessel for their efforts, their energies. Trump is cucked and compromised, but they still don't regard him as suitable because, again, like they place a lot of emphasis on like language and formality, and he uses crude language. He gives the game away too often. He's too thuggish. But again, if he gets in, they can live with him. Like let's not pretend otherwise here. On Burlow, hello to you. Peter, hello to you in Perfidious Albion. Kevin, greetings to you out there in Sligo. Zane Mudassir is with us. Party Bear says there is no fundamental difference between Trump and Kamala. Our goal as communists is to reach those still in electoral politics with Marxism, not isolate ourselves from them. Good point from Party Bear there. Greetings to Irish Partisan, our comrade in Minsk. Zane Mudassir says black bourgeoisie are pushing Kamala based on vibes. What else have they got to push her on? Because it sure as shit ain't anything that she's done in office. Though I do notice that our old friends in Jacobin, and let me just show you this one because this is an absolute classic from that old fraudster Branko Marketic. If you're familiar with his oeuvre, I'll just show you one of his latest. Which Kamala Harris are we getting? Kamala Harris appears to be the likely Democratic presidential nominee. A look back at her political career reveals a politician who matched every progressive achievement with a conservative one, says Branko Marketic. Well, Branko is a man who sure as hell does like his fantasies. There is no progressive version of Kamala Harris. I mean, I think that article is so ludicrous, I'm probably going to have to do a special episode on it. So we'll come back to that in the future. Ian Foster, good evening to you, comrade. Zane Mudassir says Kennedy is gone, Cornel West still in the race. Yeah, though quite why I'm not sure. He's done his absolute best to make sure that nobody knows he's actually running for president. Rista Kostadinov says it's funny how the Democrats and Republicans are backpedaling on their values. What values are those? I mean, Kamala basically backpedaled on the wall the other day. Again, like Hillary Clinton had come out in favor of some kind of border separation wall or fence before. Bill Clinton was one of the biggest militarizers of the border in recent history. So, like this idea that the Democrats are like the soft ones on immigration, no, they are just more slippery about it. The Republicans are slippery too, but they're slippery about it from a left perspective in that they like to talk the language of compassion, but really they're all about making sure that the immigration continues, but it continues in such a way as to render the workers that come in as helpless as possible in front of the state and the employers to secure hyper-exploitable labour. Republicans want that too, they just go about it in slightly different ways. Same end result though. Rista Costadino says Trump is now pro-abortion and Kamala is into fracking and backing Build the Wall. Yeah, Obama made and boasted about making the US an even bigger oil producer. I remember he boasted about that. I won't do the Obama impression, I haven't got it ready yet. But he went up in front of that, I think it's a crowd of donors, and says, I made us into the biggest oil producer in the world or something, thanks to new oil drilling licenses being approved and also more fracking permits being approved for gas extraction. So this idea that the Democrats are anti the oil industry, this isn't true. Like periodically they will, when it's election year, and they need to mobilize their environmentalist zealots who are still in favor of them, like the Sunrise Movement, they'll like deny some permits for a while or hold some up. But then they'll hurry them through if they get under pressure over gas prices. So this idea that Obama was anti-oil or anti-gas, or that Kamala is, or that Biden was, none of it is true. Again, like this is all stuff, this is all propaganda from both sides designed to get you to buy into the American oligarchic system. There is no such thing in the higher ranks of US politics as an anti-oil politician. periodically the Democrats will pander to environmentalists and pretend that they are. But when it comes down to, push comes to shove, they'll be as pro drilling for oil as the Republicans are, and they'll talk about building the wall. And Kamala will unleash another wave of border militarization. It's not designed to shut down the border or anything. It's designed to, again, further militarize things, to further control the working class population that comes over the border and comes to the United States to work. Comradely greetings to Svetlana in Moscow, who joins us. Zayn Madassi says, I consider woke imperialism is the meme with US drones with LGBT flags killing people. Yes, more gay drone operators needed. More time needed is enjoying the program. Apparently it's Knowledge Day. Well, I'm hoping bringing some to you. The Red Terror says that will be the only difference. Trump will be worse on Palestine, maybe, and the liberals will suddenly be against the genocide because they can blame it on him. Oh, they'll never be against it. Now, there's a reason why the both parties are fully behind the genocide. It's because it's in the interest of American imperialism that all the resistance axis groups in the West Asian region are defeated. It's in the interest of American imperialism directly that Hamas and the other resistance forces in Gaza are defeated. It's in the interest of the US imperialism that Hezbollah is defeated. And if they can get Israel to do that for them, then that's good. The only problem the US has got at the moment is the Israelis can't do it, which is the reason why now they're going back and forth on different tactics. They're now looking to see if they can lever out Netanyahu again and bring in a new government led by Yair Lapid and have the whole thing rebranded. That's what they'd like to do. They haven't managed to get rid of Netanyahu yet, though, because he's determined to cling on to the bitter end. Rista Costadino says Michigan will be pretty bloody given the fact that people from West Asia live there and decided they will not vote. Yeah, I read there's a piece in Middle East Eye from quite recently. Said that this was from a couple of days ago. Said that there's going to be like a 40% drop in Muslim support for the Democrats, and in Michigan, Jill Stein is polling as well amongst Muslims as Kamala Harris is. So it could boost the Stein vote, and it could cost Harris Michigan, which would be quite something. That would be a positive outcome, if only from the sort of the destructive point of view. Neander Wallace says, only in America could a billionaire walk down a golden escalator and be seen as an anti-establishment revolutionary. Oh, I don't know, Neander. It could happen here as well. Remember, we are the country that produced the rebel billionaire Richard Branson. So again, it could presumably happen in any capitalist country or certainly any imperialist country, but perhaps Trump is uniquely American, but it could easily happen here too. Robeson joins us from early morning in Indonesia. Hello to you over there in Jakarta. Rista Costadinov says the only right-wing populist the United States ever had was Nixon. He did appeal to the white working class voter, but he did not put his money where his mouth is when the late 60s, early 70s inflation hit with price controls. Rista Costadinov adds, Trump was right-wing populist only on rhetoric. Yeah. Neander Wallace says we vote on the simulation that we want. Yeah, true enough. Zane says lots of Arab Americans in Michigan hope they will stop Kamala. Maybe. Neander Wallace says those TTIP and TPP trade agreements were insane. If government banned smoking in beer gardens, for example, the tobacco industry could sue the government for loss of profits. Totally insane. Well, yes. We'll see if that beer garden, the smoking ban, comes into effect. KP Jen is enjoying the program. Good to have you with us. Greetings to Abtin, who's working the late night shift over there in Gothenburg, Sweden. Good to have you with us, comrade. Good afternoon to Jeremy Turner, who says the hatred of women is mighty intense in America. I think the strongest antagonism of all. I mean, I'm not in America. I mean, I haven't set foot in the United States since 1997. So you'll have to. I follow your country from afar. Um, I don't know if. Well, in fact, I'm sure that the hatred of women is not the primary contradiction inside the United States. I think there's a lot of it about. There's capitalism does breed anti woman hatred, certainly via things like the porn industry. But I'd be interested for you, Jeremy, to elaborate on your comment, if you could. Do give us some examples of why you think it's more intense now. Would you say it's more intense now in the United States than it was before in your experience? I'm curious as to what's triggering your comments. Do please elaborate. Clinton comes here from Galloway's program and says, just switched over from George Galloway, who seems to be praising the German far-right AFD recent electoral success. Not sure about Galloway. I am sure about Galloway, Clinton. I mean, I was a member of his party, and it's for those completely rank, opportunistic reasons i.e., the way he acts sometimes, which is wholly opportunistic and without principle. Those are the reasons why, some of the reasons why I left. Like the AFD. I mean, we will deal with the AFD tomorrow, when we get when we're clear on the results. But the AFD, the idea that they're anti-establishment, again, this is based on media hysteria and a con job done by the German bourgeois. The AFD are basically just a sort of more a sort of German version of some of the creations we've had over here, like aligned with Farage. They're basically like just a bit more over to the right than the CDU, CSU are. So this idea that they're a radical break is, I think, deluded. And if you would examine the AFD's actual record, they're all over the place on so many different issues. Just like the Front National, the Rassemblement National are in France, just like Meloni's gang are in Italy. And ultimately the AFD will just cuck and will largely fall in behind whatever it is that the priority of the German ruling class is. So Galloway praising them, I mean, I'm not surprised. He'd praise the devil himself if he turned up and called himself a multipolarist. This is what I mean when I say a lot of this multipolar crap that gets talked is just simply opportunism. It's not serious. It's just jumping on any bandwagon that goes past that can be seen to be portrayed as anti-US, which the AFD aren't, or anti-liberal. And again, these aren't serious propositions for class politics. But then again, I don't think Galloway's ever really been in favour of class politics. Galloway is in favour of Galloway. Rista Kostadinov says Anthony Weiner was texting minors and Republicans never used that to destroy Hillary's campaign. He is husband to Hillary's campaign manager. Good point. Weiner is essentially a paedophile, and a disgusting scumbag. And that was known about and wasn't used. Why? Because the Republicans have just as many people doing about exactly the same thing on their side. There's real agreements and tacit agreements between these two oligarchic parties over what they'll use against each other. And they'll never go too far. They'll always remain within the game. Going further down. Hello to Jenny, who's joined us. Obama's mother was in Indonesia in the 1965 anti-communist killings. Yes, with Obama's stepfather. So what were they doing there? These were two U.S. intelligence assets active in a zone of the world, area of the world that was of key strategic interest to American and British imperialism, which genocided, at least 1 million people in 1965. What were the Obama family doing there? What was the Sotero family doing there? Going down a little bit further, Tim Gray says, the crisis in the US ruling class reads a bit like the breakdown of the leadership in the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. no longer capable of expansion and faced with internal unrest from its proxies. Yep, there's always certain comparisons to be made. I mean, Roman history is rich with comparisons when you're looking at the downfall of an empire, especially the degenerate figures it produced towards the end. Ian Foster says, as president, Trump had just two positives. He spared us a Hillary presidency, and his visit to the DPRK. Hopes for improved relations were then immediately negated by Bolton et al. Yeah, I mean, I would say that Hillary losing was funny, but that was about it. And I mean, he visited the DPRK, and I think Trump himself, if we're being honest, would have signed a deal, but he had no idea as to how to get one. He wasn't going to write any treaty himself. He turned it over to officials, and all the officials he appointed were like the worst scumbags in Washington who weren't in the Democratic Party. And he's talking about bringing back Pompeo. He's talking about bringing in Tom Cotton. It's like, so this is the administration that he's going to be launching. It's filled with people who would have happily been in a George W. Bush administration. So there's going to be no difference. It really is not the case that there's going to be any radical change here. Jenny says they can't actually go after real crimes, they commit them all. And Jenny is 100% correct. On Burlow says Dems are there to get hedonists under control, and Republicans to get religious people mostly, and then let them serve the same old oppressors. Good point. Grassy Knoll says Jeffrey Epstein built a whole compound at his New Mexico ranch for the whole Clinton family when they would visit. And I wonder what they got up to down there. Grassy Knoll says, I would like to meet a graduate of Trump University. If you're a graduate of Trump University, let me know. Come on the program. We'll talk about it. It'll be great. Greetings to James Goblin out in Belgrade, the once and future capital of socialist Yugoslavia. Russia heard my call, says Jenny, and has made it easier for Westerners to move to Russia. Well, I will see you all there in about a year's time. We'll all meet up. We'll all meet up once we've learnt enough Russian. Well, the Russians can swap their libs, to answer Krasovets's comment. They can swap their libs out and put them in the West. That'd be perfect. Tim Gray says the US ruling class have crafted the perfect democratic illusion, a president with no power and democratic bodies that cosplay, blocking each other's policies. Yes, whilst the real decisions are made elsewhere, and it has been like that for many decades now. Rista Costadino says it's interesting how the empire didn't prefer someone like Bernie to prolong the widening contradictions. Because they can't even afford to have a Bernie Sanders character do some pandering. Like, this is the thing that we have to learn about the system. It's so corroded now and so incapable of reform. It can't even have a Sanders or a Corbyn come in and pretend to do reforms. It has to keep the population pacified and demoralized and hopeless. They can't even be allowed to hope of anything better. CJ Jackson says, capitalism seems to be dead or on its way to the grave. With a void soon to appear in the social, political, economic sphere, will communism have a chance to fill that void? It will have a chance as long as we organise properly for it. Nothing happens automatically. Well, to answer CJ Jackson's next comment, look, it'll take newly organised or reorganised communist parties in every country to lead the change to a workers' state and the building of socialism. Some good progress has been made with the launch of the American Communist Party over in the USA. I hope that progress continues. Talking of oil, says Neander Wallace, did you know that a few months ago Russia discovered 510 billion gallons worth of oil in a British-ruled region of Antarctica? British ruled because it's close to the Falklands. Well, what do you know? Maybe that's the reason why that cuck Millet rapidly did a deal with the British. He probably got paid off to allow them to steal the oil. Morgan says Trump does not have the ability to be his 2016 self anymore, but there are a lot more sections of the ruling class rowing in behind him than in the last two election cycles. Morgan raises a good point, which is Trump has lost the outsider status and the comedic routines of 2016. But yes, there are more members of the ruling class lining up behind him now for a variety of reasons. I think part of that is the idea that Trump is actually going to be a better steward of the empire in crisis. There are some in the ruling class who believe that the Democrats have lost the plot, and for a variety of reasons, and are prepared to go with Trump. So he's gained ruling class support. I think he's probably lost a bit when it comes to the enthusiasm of the American workers or some in the petty bourgeois. But yes, you're right. He has pulled in more ruling class support. Even like people like Zuckerberg, who's traditionally associated with the Democrats, have gone in behind him. So that is an important difference this time around. Morgan's right to bring the point up. Even the fraud squad says Jenny isn't allowed to be anti-Israel. Yes, that's true. You're not allowed to be anti something that's so important to the empire, to imperialism. Look, they weren't allowed to. Remember what happened when the Democrats published or attempted to publish that letter in favor of a ceasefire in Ukraine? They were browbeaten down within 24 hours. They were even more in lockstep with the Republicans and the administration, the fraud squad, as Jenny calls them, over Ukraine, and they are over Israel. There's no criticism allowed in the Democratic Party of the Ukraine war at all. There is some allowed in the Republican Party because it's seen as the Democratic Party's war, and so there's much more criticism there. But the Democratic Party is absolutely 100% lined up behind this Ukraine war because, again, it's a priority of empire. And you're not allowed to be anti-Israel too much, maybe a little bit more because of the way the balance of power in the Democratic Party's voting base is arranged. But no, you're not allowed to really be anti either of these things in the United States political system. If you are anti-Israel, they will primary you perpetually with very well-funded rival candidates. And as Bowman found out, you basically spend several years doing fuck all, destroying the goodwill that brought you into office in the first place, demoralizing the people who campaigned for you. And then the AIPAC runs a very well-funded campaign against you anyway, and you still lose. Having pandered and compromised for several years, you still lose. So again, you're not allowed to go against the priorities of imperialism, be it in Ukraine or in Israel, in the Democratic Party. And when it comes to the Republican Party, Israel's the more important out of those two. But it should also be said that for all the bitching of Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz, the bulk of the Republican Party still votes for the aid packages, the weapons packages to go to Ukraine. They're still on board with it. Trump is too, by the way. I mean, Trump rolled over on that big one when the Republicans have been holding it up, or Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and others have been holding it up. Trump cut a deal and rolled over on it. So again, like this, the Trump the oppositionist is just a myth. Bart Vischer says Palestine will be the only thing keeping Harris from winning. You may be right. If it costs Harris the election, that will be funny. Jeremy Turner says, and elaborating on his comment earlier, I think Trump's popularity was partly because of his disparaging of women, and also the LGBTQT popularity is also against women. Pornography is rampant, and more than ever, working class women are pushed. Okay, I think your comment got cut off there, but I understand what you mean now. Yeah. And good late evening to Sean, who has joined us. On Burlow says, oppressors made science religion, and they are working hard to make the next post-capitalist system based on fake propaganda, based on emotional manipulation through things such as nature. They want to make it seem like post-capitalist, but it's going to be another label based on emotional manipulation. You raised some interesting points there. The way in which the imperialists are able to absorb so-called radical critiques and basically pump them out as propaganda. That's something that we may well need to revisit. Okay, so we are at 5 to 9 in the evening. I'm going to draw things to a close for tonight. There's 290 of you watching on X and on YouTube. I don't know how many are there on Rumble, but hello to you if you are. Join us again tomorrow at the same time, where we will be talking about all things German, and I will not be doing any impressions of Basil Fawlty out of concern for the sensibilities of our German listeners. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I'll be back with you again tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and on Buy Me a Coffee. Join me again tomorrow, and until then I will say good night and solidarity to you all.